أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. صدق الله العظيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم آمين. أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Dear brothers and sisters in Islam, may peace, Allah's mercy and blessings be upon you all. Thank you very much for taking out this precious time to attend today's sharing, and the topic is about Islam and science. Some of you may think, well, it's a cliche topic, right? We talk about religion and science all the time. But it's an important topic because oftentimes when you have an incomplete understanding of religion or science, either one or both sometimes, you may develop improper attitude toward science or religion. We have religious people who are anti-science, and we have scientific people who are anti-religion, and either one of them is problematic and actually does more harm to human civilization than good, and we'll see why that is the case. But I began by this ayah from Surah Ali Imran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about a kind of people. First of all, he mentioned that the creation of the heavens and the earth and the rotation of night and day are ayat, are signs for those of understanding. So he clearly told us that you have to think about the natural world. You have to observe the natural phenomena and think about it. And then he said, Alladhina, those people who remember Allah while standing and sitting and lying on their sides. وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. In the Arabic language, that connecting word wa denotes that the two things you're talking about have something in common, like they're related. Or in any language, if you say and, the two things are related. So Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling us that remembering Him and mentioning Him, يَذْكُرُونَ Allah, is connected and related to فِكْرُ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, the thinking and contemplation upon the heavens and the earth, the natural phenomena. These two things are related. And he said, what is the relation then? He explained this relation by quoting the words of these people, which is رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا. Our Lord, you have not created all of this purposelessly. This is not in vain. There is a meaning to this. There is a reason why you did this, right? And Subhanak, how perfect are you? There are two explanations or two interpretations of the Subhanak here. One of them is that you will notice in the Quran, whenever some statement which is inappropriate about Allah Azza wa Jal, or far from the truth about Allah Azza wa Jal, or is totally improper for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, subhanallah will be followed. For example, وَقَالُوا اتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ وَلَدًا Subhanak. They say that Allah has taken a son. Subhanallah. How perfect is Allah? So this phrase is to denote that what people have said, or the wrong ideas or the wrong understandings, are far from true. Allah is too perfect for those kind of statements. So they said, you have not created all of this in vain. And are there people in the world who think that the world has no purpose? Yes, there are a lot of people until this day, right? There are people who think it's all by accident. The earth just became habitable to human beings by accident. And all of the laws of nature are just by accident. Everything is just probability and there's no purpose. And we say, Subhanak, how perfect are you, Allah? This kind of statement is far from true and not befitting to be placed upon you. And also the second interpretation of Subhanak is when they look at all of the natural phenomena, they naturally would, praise the one who designed all of this, right? Because I studied science in high school, and when I studied biology and when I studied physics, I couldn't help but always and frequently saying Subhanallah. When you learn about how accurately, DNA translates into, the codes of genes, and then the mRNA would carry the what's that called? What's that acid called? Amino acid, right? The amino acid, and then every 3 codes will decide one, and then they will construct a protein, and each protein will then, make up your body parts. How perfectly that is being carried out. You say, subhanallah, you just realize that there must be a powerful and wise and merciful and beautiful creator behind all of this. And that's the second interpretation of subhanak. So don't think, Muslim parents, don't think that when your children go to school and learn science, they will become kafir. No. If you give them proper tarbiyah, like a good foundation for what is science, they will learn science and they will keep saying subhanallah. That is what we want. We don't want our children to say astaghfirullah in front of science. We want them to say subhanallah in front of science. Now, eventually their last dua is faqina azab an-nar. So protect us from the fire. What is the relationship here? Now, when they realize that everything in nature is devised so perfectly, they would naturally believe even more strongly that whatever Allah said is true, right? Is absolutely, fundamentally, and undoubtedly true. And then when Allah talks about hellfire in the Quran, they believe it's true. It's 100% true. And then they say, فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ, oh Allah, protect us from the fire. So, and there's also a transition from observation to thinking to action, isn't it? They observe the word and they think about it, and they now are able to make dua to Allah and ask for protection. And of course, these people, by extension, they will also act obediently to prevent themselves from being punished by fire. So this is you can say a beginning cue of today's sharing. Now, today's sharing will consist of 3 parts. The first part is a general relationship between religion and science. I'll talk about some myths or some misunderstandings and the reality. And then the second part, we'll talk about some science, or here S-I-G and I's, right? Some ayat in the Quran and Sunnah, which are, you can say scientific in one way, but we all understand, Muslims understand that the Quran is not a science book. We don't try to, find out about the word from the Quran, but Allah Azza wa Jalla just placed, certain hints in the Quran that are slightly scientific or that have relationships with science to give you some idea or to give you some reminders. But we don't treat the Quran as a science book, and I will explain more later. And then the third part, I will briefly introduce you to the Islamic Golden Age, a largely forgotten history, especially in Western people's discourse. Now, religion and science, a few common perceptions. The first one is that religion was invented because ancient people couldn't explain for natural phenomena using scientific theories. Like they didn't know why lightning happened, or why thunder happened, or why earthquake happened, or why volcano erupted. They couldn't explain all of this. So they came up with a bunch of supernatural and spiritual explanations for all of this, right? And this is actually true for some religions, for some folk religions, indigenous local religions, in some like ancient African tribes, the shaman, is it called the shamans? The shamans, they will tell their people, oh, it is because you people lied so much and God is angry, and that's why the earth shook to remind you. So these kind of theories, you can see this perception does apply to some religions, some traditions, in some periods of time, in some regions in the world, but it does not apply to all religions. It certainly does not apply to most of the world major religions, right? It doesn't apply to most of the monotheist religions in the world. And it certainly does not apply to Islam, because the argument, so if this is the case, let's make a logical argument. If religion only existed because people couldn't explain for the word scientifically, then you would expect, as science develops, as we know more about the word scientifically, people will be less willing to believe in religion. So more people will be not religious, right? People don't need religion anymore because now we have science, now we have quantum physics, and you would think that people will leave religion as we become more scientific. But when you look at the word, that's not the case. And also, obviously, if you think that religion was only to fill in the blank of ignorance, then the most knowledgeable country in the world, and the most scientific country in the world, the most developed country in the world in terms of science, should also be the least religious. Isn't that the case? But let's look at the United States. It's like a superpower in terms of science. They have sent human being on the moon, and they have sent like a robot on the Mars, right? And they are leading in so many different fields of science. Like you think of China as also a rising superpower, and it's true. We're leading also in many scientific fields. But there are a few technologies like the chips, the chips, and also I think what is it called? In also astronomy. So in terms of sending rockets, and also space station, in terms of this space technology, we're still like 50 years behind. So when you think of America as such a superpower in technology, if this is true, if this statement is true, then it should be the least religious country in the world. Nobody should be religious in America, right? But what is the reality? The reality is about 90% of the US population are religious. About 9 out of 10 people in the US believe in some kind of a religion, some kind of a supernatural or spiritual system. And still, until this day, the US president will say, God bless you, God bless America, right? And they would still write in their bill, in God we trust, not in Trump we trust. So the spiritual connection is still there. And you may say that, well, if you only take the US as an example, that could not be very representative. I agree with you, and I appreciate your academic integrity. So let's look at the words. Let's look at a larger scale. This is an article written by The Guardian in 2018. You have heard of The Guardian, right? It's one of the most reliable media in the UK. And they quoted evidence from Pew Research Center, which is one of the most reliable independent research think tank in the world. So in 2018, last year, they wrote an article and found out that if you think religion belongs to the past and we live in a new age of reason, you need to check out the facts. 84% of the world's population identifies with a religious group. That's a lot. And members of this demographic are generally younger and produce more children than those who have no religious affiliation. So the world is getting more religious, not less, although there are significant geographical variations. Like when I told Chinese people about this, they are shocked. Because like in Chinese people's experience and perspective, they're like, most people are not religious. And I told them that's because about 70% of the non-religious people live in 3 countries in the world: China, Czech Republic, and North Korea. Let's just leave it at that. So yeah, the world is becoming more religious, and it's certainly true for Islam. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. The population growth is more than twice the overall population growth in the world, which means every time a baby is born, 2 Muslim babies are born. That's almost what it is like. And also, in America, 23% say that they converted to Islam. So it's not like a lot of people say that Muslims inherited religion from their parents, or like Muslim children have no choice but to be Muslims. That's certainly not true. More than one fifth of American Muslims converted to Islam. They accepted Islam. They decided to become Muslims for themselves. And 91% of those converts are born in the United States. They are born in the land of the free. They are born in one of the most materialistic and one of the most liberalistic societies in the world. And they choose to apply all of these, regulations on themselves. They choose to stay away from certain drinks and certain lifestyle. They choose to restrict themselves in a way. Obviously, they find benefit in that, and we'll see what's the benefit of that. So clearly, from these examples, we see that the first one is a fallacy, right? It's a misconception. It's not true that religion was invented because people couldn't explain, and it was only because of ignorance. Apparently now there are a lot of professors, IT people, or researchers, very intelligent people that are religious, right? So the first one has been, I think, explained. The second perception or misperception is that religion is the opiate of the masses. Who said this? Who used this phrase? Nobody knows? No. Who said religion is the opiate of the... Do you know what is opium? It's like drug, right? Karl Marx said this. Karl Marx wrote that religion is the opiate of the masses because in his mind, and that's because of his specific social environment and his upbringing, what he saw was that the upper class of the society uses religion as a tool to keep the working class and the lower class, the proletarians, in their social class without even desiring a change, right? So in his mind, religion is like this lock, this prison that imprisons your mind and prevents you from trying to go upward. Religion is this thing that fools you into accepting your oppression, accepting your slavery, accepting, the destiny, the so-called destiny that the powerful people have, enforced on you or imposed on you. And again, this statement is true, is applicable to certain social environment in certain time in the history, because we do know in Hinduism, or at least some branches of Hinduism and in some branches of Buddhism, they have this idea that your life, like the situation that you were in when you were born, your life circumstances were decided by your past life, right? This is in Hinduism and Buddhism. So if you are suffering, if you are a slave, for example, if you are a worker or a laborer, that's because you did a lot of bad stuff in the past life. And what do you do about it? You just be patient and bear all the sufferings and don't complain. And in Hinduism, like there's, in a most extreme case, there's still the caste system in which people say that if you're born into a certain family with a certain name or a caste, then you are born to be less honorable than another class or name, right? You're born to be serving that class even. You're born to be worse and less valuable and worse, worthy as a human being than the other class. And what do you do about it? Don't complain, because it's your destiny. You did this your last life, so you just bear with it and be patient and do a lot of good work in this life, and the next life you'll be better, right? The next life you'll be the master. So what Marx said was not entirely false. It is true that applies to this kind of ideas in this kind of societies. And it's pretty bad when people use religion this way, or when problematic religions propagate this kind of idea. But again, it doesn't apply to all religions, and certainly it does not apply to Islam. Because first of all, Islam is perhaps one of the earliest religions to establish the equality of mankind, as the Quran clearly states that akramakum indallahi atqakum, the most honorable among you are the most God conscious of you, the one who has most taqwa, which is something that you cannot measure and human beings cannot see. So clearly this has already placed us on an equal standing. And Islam is also one of the most practically powerful religion to eradicate slavery from its society. Like all religions, sooner or later they talk about this, but no society has done it so effectively than the early generations of the Muslims. Now, so this one doesn't apply. And also another logical argument, a refutation to this idea is, if you think that people, so the ancient poor people, they accepted their fate and they said, you know what, we're born to be poor, we're born to be servants, and we just accept it, and we just hope for heaven, we just hope for the kingdom of heaven and hope for a good next life, and that's it. Then naturally you would think that once people become rich, and once their social class elevates, once they become powerful themselves, once they become the master of their own material life at least, then they would not believe in religion anymore. In fact, if that's the case, they would hate religion. They would fight religion. They would want to eradicate religion. Isn't that the case? So again, let me phrase this simpler. If this is true, if religion is to control people and to blind you and to make you immobile, then once people become rich, they will unlock themselves. They don't want religion anymore. They want to be free. But again, this is not the case. This time I'll use the example of China. In 2008, and this time the quote is in Chinese, the translation in English, it's only fair. In 2006, and this is official data, China has about 100 million religious people of different faiths. And again, just a side note, at that time, 2006, there are about 10 million Christians. Okay, remember this number, about 10 million Christians, 100 million religious people, 18 million Muslims. About 10 years later, in 2018, again, official data, religious population is close to 200 million. So first of all, that's a 100 million increase in about 10 years. That's faster than the population growth in China, right? So, and also, I forgot to mention, in this part, the author said, in the past century, which happened to be the century of the economic boom of China, Economy was developing so fast that everyone was calling it a miracle in China. But no, people didn't become less religious, they became more religious. When they become rich, when they can buy cars and houses, they decided, you know what, I need to believe in something. I need a religion now. So it defeats that second misconception. And also, as I mentioned, 10 years ago there were 10 million Christians, and now last year 38 million. So that's a 28 million increase. 10 years ago there were 18 million Muslims, and now 20 million Muslims, right? So a shout out to all the Muslims in China. It's not the social environment that prevented our growth, because the Christians are doing pretty well. There's still plenty of room that we can work with. We still have to do more to deliver our message, at least. That's our responsibility. Although I don't know why I'm saying that in English. Anyway, so that defeats the second point. And actually, you would ask, why is that the case? When people's economy become better, why do they become more religious, or they tend to accept a religion? There's a so-called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's a very popular theory in psychology. So Maslow says that human beings have several layers of needs, or several levels of needs, and the physiological needs, including food and water, and those are the most fundamental needs. Those are not the only needs. So he's saying that a human being, any human being, will not be satisfied with just being full and having a shelter and a place to sleep. No one will be satisfied by that. Human beings are made to desire more. And then there's safety needs, and then there's love and belonging, and then there's self-esteem. And on the highest part, he wrote self-actualization, right? Although this is a popular theory, but first of all, the different kinds of needs we can personally identify with, right? We have all of these needs. So clearly, people will not just be happy when they are rich, when they have money, and like, okay, I'll just live my life like this. I'll just enjoy myself. No, actually, we have so many examples, like just from top of my head, Jim Carrey. How many of you have heard of Jim Carrey? The one who played the Truman Show, right? A famous Hollywood actor. And he was a comedy actor. He was a funny guy. He once said in an inauguration speech, he said that, I wish everyone could be rich and famous and have everything they ever wanted, because then they will know it's not the answer. It doesn't satisfy you. And then Matt Damon, how many of you know Matt Damon? The one who acted in Martian and Good Will Hunting, a lot of movies. Yeah, he played in a lot of movies. The Bourne Identity is exactly. So he got an Academy Award very young, right? He achieved the Oscar Award when he was like 24 or 25, very young age. And then he was interviewed once on the Graham Norton show, and he was asked, like, how did you feel when you got that, the little goat man, the Oscar Award? And he said he actually got teary. He started, having some tears in his eyes. And he said, I felt lucky that I got this award early in my career, because I can't imagine a person giving up his whole life, 50, 60 years, going after something like this, and only then, at the end of your life, realizing it still doesn't fill the hope. It still doesn't fill the void in your heart. He said this on a show. You can check it on YouTube. And also, Robin Williams. How many of you have heard of Robin Williams? Again, a very talented, a great comedian. He also played in Good Will Hunting. He also won an Academy Award. And as a stand-up comedian, he has this talent wherever he goes, and he improvises. He doesn't even plan for his jokes. He just talks randomly, and people will continue laughing. He has that gift. So such a person who brings laughter and happiness to millions of people around the world, he committed suicide in 2014 out of depression, severe depression. So clearly, these people had multiple houses, mansions, and all the luxury cars in the world. They could buy whatever they want. They could be with whoever they want, and they could have all the fun and joy and material gains in the world, but it didn't satisfy them. That's why we believe Maslow is right. We do have all of these needs. And self-actualization, again, it's not something, through these examples I just shared, it's not something that can be earned through worldly status or money. And Allah has already told us this, so we don't even have to go to these examples. Self-actualization can only be gained when you are connected to your purpose, to why you are created. And also, there's a funny new version. There's the most fundamental need, battery life and Wi-Fi. And after that, we have the other needs. So, and again, as I said, it's only a theory because we Muslims can disagree with this sequence. We believe there are, these different categories, but we don't believe that physiological is more fundamental than self-actualization, right? Because if you look at Islamic history, did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala satisfy the Muslims' safety needs, food and water first, technology first, societal prosperity first, or spirituality first? Spirituality first. He gave Muslims yaqeen, firm belief. He gave Muslims unity. He gave Muslims that strong desire to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gave them that courage to stand up with simple life, but to declare that I have the truth in the word. And for that, I'm proud. Right? It's just like when Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh went to Jerusalem to accept the surrender of the archpriest, like the leader of Jerusalem at the time, a Christian leader. And he was wearing clothes full of, is it called rags? Like full of, openings. It was not a very luxury clothes. And he said, so, one of the Muslim representatives in the city came to him and said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, this is a little awkward. You should wear something nice for the occasion. And Umar said, woe to you. We were a lowly people and Allah honored us through Islam. We're not honored by our clothes or what we eat or what we use or what we drive. No. We are honored because of our Islam. We're honored because of La ilaha illallah. So Allah gave the Muslims, the Sahaba and the Tabi'in and the Taba Tabi'in, this strong iman first. And then conquest comes naturally. And then prosperity comes naturally. And then science and technology comes naturally. And money and fame is just a small issue. When you have your purpose, and when you have that guideline, that framework to tell you what is good and what is bad, everything else becomes easy. So that's just a side note. And also, the third and the most common perception, science and religion are incompatible, right? That's why some scientific people like, what's his name? I forgot his first name, but his last name is Dawkins. Richard Dawkins, the author of the Selfish Gene. He's so scientific that he's anti-religion, right? And we also have religious people. I shouldn't use the word fundamentalist because it has already been misinterpreted and misused so much. But there are religious people who are, narrow-minded, that they are anti-science. Anything related to science is like, an attack to their faith. And both of these opinions are problematic. And science and religion, are they incompatible? First of all, we have to think of where this idea comes from. Actually, it comes from European history, right? In modern academia, we have this thing called Eurocentrism or Western centrism, which is like when you read academic papers about the relationship between science and religion, it's always about Christianity and science and religion. It's always about Christianity and science, as if Christianity is a archetypal representative of all religions, as if Christianity sufficiently includes all the elements of all religions, which is not the case. There are many differences among all the different religions, even if you consider the Abrahamic religions similar in their root, but we do know for sure as Muslims that Islam is fundamentally different from Christianity in many ways. Forget about even, the metaphysical differences, like, how do we identify Jesus, Islam, all of these are apart. We have historic differences. Our societies developed differently. We experienced different things with regards to science. So that's why Eurocentrism or Western centrism is a problem, especially when you use that perspective as if that's the truth, as if that's like representative of the whole world, of the whole human history. So, but if you understand that, you will understand why Western people especially think that science and religion are incompatible, because they have this history, right? In medieval Europe, what was that period of time called by Western historians? It was called the Dark Ages. Why was it the Dark Ages? This is a painting that scientists were being burned to death. They were sentenced to fire because their theories or their proposals differed from the Bible. And then at that time, the church was the institutional authority of the society, and nobody can speak against the church. The church decides what is true and what is not. And the reason why they would punish scientists that spoke differently from the Bible is because once their theories become accepted, or even worse, proven and widely prevalent, then people will lose their faith in the Bible. That's what they're thinking, at least. So when you have such a history, then it's natural that you would have developed this hostility or this fear, right? Or this distance with religion. You would naturally conclude that it was religion that prevented science from developing. It was religion that stopped science from occurring in our society. And also, the Western civilization was based on a very important principle called the separation of church and state. So the Western people, especially the liberals, they would think that it was only when we separated from the church that we started having rational thinking, that we started having, wisdom and true freedom of thought, and all of these, technologies and revolutions and good things in general came after we got rid of religion. That's the Western historic mindset, and it was based in reality. It was based in this reality. But the problem is, as I said, this is not the only human history. Europe is not the only part of the world. There's a vast majority of the world who didn't experience this. As a matter of fact, their neighbor, their neighboring civilization, the Muslim civilization, at the same time, the same historic period from the 8th century to the 12th century, or even beyond that, a few hundred years, by Western historians, is called the Golden Age. And the Golden Age is so unknown to not only Western people, to even many Muslims. We haven't even heard about the Golden Age. And wait, there's a video here. How come it's gone? Let me find it. I want to play a video. Oh my god, it's here. Yeah. Let's see. Wait.
The expansion that he initiated was unbelievably successful. I mean, within 600 years, it was the biggest empire the world had ever seen. And it demolished Byzantine Christianity, which is something that Western people don't even know. I've read thinkers who said that the West was so traumatized, culturally, let's say, by the demolition of Byzantine Christianity, that we can't even study it now. And so, I don't know if that's true, but I don't know that it's not true either.
So this person is called Jordan Peterson. He's a professor of psychology in University of Toronto, and he's very open-minded. He's a Christian, but when he was asked a question about Christianity, about Islam, he said, I just don't know enough about it to comment. Because the West, collectively, as a civilization, we know so little about Islam. Purposely, like he said, we were traumatized, basically, by that history. We are so, afraid of the fact that the Byzantine Christianity was so completely defeated by Islam, not only in terms of military power, but also in terms of intellect, in terms of civilization. So they don't even talk about it, right? And there are many other reasons for the hidden, image of this golden age. There are political reasons as well. But we shouldn't hide from this past. We should know our history. We should, extract wisdom from our history. Now, you would also ask, why is there a difference in the civilizations then? Like, why does the Christian civilization and the church prevent science from developing, while the Muslim civilization, which you can also argue is a civilization that combines church and state, right? Our religious authority and political authority were one during this time. There was the Khalifa. How come in the Muslim civilization we didn't burn scientists and we didn't kill all the new thinkers? We just allowed everything to happen naturally. Part of the reason, one of the most important reasons, is that, as I said, many statements in the Bible clearly contradict scientific discoveries. And this is not a flaw of God, this is a flaw of human beings, because we as Muslims know that the Bible has been influenced by human beings so much, you can't know which word is from God and which word is from a person, right? It's not a pure revelation anymore. So human beings made many mistakes, and then it was exposed during this time. I'll just give you a few examples. In the book of Matthew, chapter 4, verse number 8, again the devil took him, Isa alayhi salam, to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. Let me ask you, in terms of geography, what does this imply?
The world is flat.
Exactly. If you can see all the kingdoms of the world on a high mountain, that means the world is flat. There's an edge, you can see the edge of it. So that's clearly untrue. That's clearly contradictory to science. What does the Quran say instead? خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ بِالْحَقِّ. Allah says He created the heavens and the earth with truth. يُكَوِّرُ اللَّيْلَ عَلَى النَّهَارِ وَيُكَوِّرُ النَّهَارَ عَلَى اللَّيْلِ. The word يُكَوِّرُ, kawwara in Arabic language means to cover something that has a curved surface. Right? So when the Arabs, they put on their turban, that the verb they use is kawwara because it's a curved surface. The same root, kura, means a sphere, means a ball. Kuratu salla, basketball. Kuratul qadam, football. So clearly Allah is saying that He covers a day with night in a curved surface, and He covers night with day again with a curved surface. There's only one way you can do that. The earth is round. The earth is a sphere. Has curvature. That's the only way, and it's very clear. It's not even hidden, right? He wraps the night over the day. He wraps the day over the night. It doesn't contradict science. So we have no problem if our Muslim scientists developed like a globe model of the world. That's fine. The Quran has said that already. Another example in the book of, how do you pronounce this? Zam. Chapter 104, verse number 5. He set the earth on its foundations. It can never be moved. And modern people are like, awkward. The ground moves all the time, as we know. What does the Quran say? It says, خَوَتَرَى الْجِبَالَ تَحْسَبُهَا جَامِدًا. You think the mountains are rigid and stabilized, but actually وَهِيَ تَمَرُّ مَرَّ سَحَابٍ. But actually, in fact, they are walking. The word marra literally means to walk or to move, to relocate. They're moving all the time, just like the moving of the clouds. What a beautiful analogy. But the thing is, when we look at the mountains, they're not moving. So there's only one explanation. We're also moving, right, in terms of physics. So Allah says the mountain is moving, so we're not moving. Then all of us are moving. The mountains and us, human beings, are moving. Then that means the earth itself is moving. That's talking about the self-rotation of the earth. Actually, the earth never stops moving. So the mountains never stop moving. And the moving, look at the self-rotation of the earth. Isn't it just like the rotation of the cloud on the sky? It's just like the same mode. It's a beautiful analogy. So there are more examples like that, but I'll just give you two examples to show that is the reason why Christian West in the past punished scientists, while the Muslim past encouraged scholars. As you learn more, we will understand the Quran more, and we will appreciate Allah more. How great! So go ahead. Now, science in the Quran and Sunnah. Surah Al-Hadeed, Allah says, وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدِ. We send down iron. And people in the past were like, we've never seen iron dropping from the sky. That would be scary, actually. Like, iron was clearly taken out from the ground. So why did Allah say we send down iron? Why didn't He say وَخَلَقْنَا الْحَدِيدِ? We created iron. That would be more understandable. But actually, last century we got to know not only the iron on Earth, but also the iron in the entire solar system comes from outer space. So it literally drops from the sky to the Earth. Because the temperature of the sun as a star is not enough, is not sufficient to create iron as a chemical element. It can only be created in a bigger star with higher temperature from outer space. And then eventually the star explodes in a phenomenon called nova or supernova, and then the explosions will basically shoot out all the iron elements, and some of them actually drop to the sky drop to the earth from the sky. So it's a very accurate description. Embryology. Allah Azza wa Jal in several places in the Quran described the development of human embryo in much detail, right, in very accurate words. And then this is Dr. Keith Moore. He is a leading expert in the field of embryology and anatomy in the University of Toronto. He was actually his book on embryology and embryo development is used as a textbook in North America for decades. So let's see what he says.
Intensive studies of the Quran and Hadith in the last 4 years have revealed a system for classifying human embryos that is amazing since it was recorded in the 7th century A.D. Although Aristotle, the founder of the science of embryology, realized that chick embryos developed in stages from his studies of hen's eggs in the 4th century B.C., he did not give any details about these stages. As far as it is known from the history of embryology, little was known about the staging and classification of human embryos until the 20th century. For this reason, the descriptions of the human embryo in the Quran cannot be based on scientific knowledge in the 7th century. The only reasonable conclusion is that these descriptions were revealed to Muhammad from God. He could not have known such details because he was an illiterate man with absolutely no scientific training.
So clearly, he said the only reasonable explanation, and he's a scientist, he's very reasonable, is that these words are from God. And a journalist actually asked him later on, does that mean you actually accept that the Quran is a revelation? He said, I find no difficulty in accepting this. This is a true scientist, right? True scientists believe evidence. Okay. And three darknesses. Allah said in the Quran that we created you fi dhulumatin thalath. We created you in three darknesses. And the embryo development, like at first, it was just one big cell, right? And then it becomes 2, and then it becomes 4, and then 8, and 6, 16, and different stages of that fetus, that embryo. And it only develops layers at this one occasion. And at this occasion, there are 3 layers. The endoderm layer, the mesoderm layer, and the ectoderm layer. They're called germ layers. And each layer eventually differentiates, that's called self-differentiation, differentiates into different parts of the body. And then after that, like after the infant is formed, there are no layers anymore, except for the of the mother, right? So Allah said, we created you in 3 darknesses, and this is the only part of the embryo development which we find layers and 3 layers as it is, not 4, not 2. Allah could have said 3,000 darknesses, but just 3, and just exactly the same as we find in science. So that's pretty cool stuff. And also Hadees. Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu narrated that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when you become angry while standing, then sit down. If you're still angry, then lie down. Right? Simple advice, but this is a psychology book. I took a picture of it. In 2009, Harmo Jones and Peterson, psychologists, they wrote in their research paper that it is easier to feel angry while standing and therefore in a position to attack than while lying in a more helpless position. Like they earn millions of money publishing this paper in a scientific journal, and I'm like, duh, it's just one hadith in Abu Dawood. Just come on, man. So yeah, there's more in the hadith, but because of limitation of time, I'll just pass. The Islamic Golden Age, the real beginning of modern science. I already mentioned a part of this actually. When did modern science begin? Any guess? Like there's a historic moment, there was a thing, a historic event that happened that marked the beginning of modern science. Nobody knows? Like I remember I mentioned Europe changed very suddenly from the Dark Ages to all of a sudden free thinking. It's called the Renaissance, yes. And it's a French word, so it's okay if you pronounce it badly. It's actually a Renaissance. Yeah, I'm trying to be French. But what led to the Renaissance? Interesting, right? Because clearly, actually, I'll give you a hint. Renaissance is based on the Renaissance. Renaissance literally means revival, right? Revival of what? Of ancient Greek literature that was there already, that already existed in Europe like a long time ago. So what gave it life again? What brought it back to life? Why was it revived all of a sudden? Why do people start reading the ancient Greek literature again? Because the Muslims translated it into Latin and gave it to Europe again. So this is written by Robert Brivotte, a French anthropologist, in The Making of Humanity, he said it was under the influence of the Arabs and Moorish. The Moorish was the old word for Muslim. Muslim revival of culture, not in the 15th century, that a real renaissance took place. Spain, not Italy, was the cradle of the rebirth of Europe. After steadily sinking lower and lower into barbarism, it had reached the darkest depths of ignorance and degradation when cities of the Saracenic, again, Saracenic is another word used to talk about Muslims, the Saracenic word, the Muslim word, Baghdad, Cairo, Cordoba, and Toledo were growing centers of civilization and intellectual activity. It was there that a new life arose, which was to grow into a new phase of human evolution. From the time when the influence of their culture made itself felt, began the stirring of new life. So it is said that, like a French anthropologist can say this, while many Muslim children, right, who finished high school do not know about the reason for Renaissance. And we have this duty to let our children know. We have to be proud of this past. And scholars say that science found such favor in medieval Islam for several reasons. Part of the allure was mystical. It was another way to experience the unity of creation. That was the central message of Islam. And all of these are from academic papers. This one is it's a funny last name, Overby. But what does it mean? Let me give you an example. You know, I don't really know the English name of it because I studied physics in Chinese. But you know there's an attraction between planets, right? There's a force between planets. They attract each other. And the force is calculated, they are proportional to the masses and inversely proportional to the distance, to the square of the distance. Yeah, some of you nodding, alhamdulillah. One person has studied physics in this room. Alhamdulillah, the ummah has hope. So basically, you calculate the attraction between planets by, they are proportional to the masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance. Just remember this, it's okay. And then, this is the most macroscopic vision human beings can have. The universe, the outer universe, is the biggest place we can think of, right? Let's now go to the most microscopic version of existence, which is inside an atom. Inside of an atom, we know there is an atomic core. And then outside the atomic core, there are electrons rotating at high speed around the core. First of all, just this structure is very similar to the planets already. Right? In the universe, planets revolve around the star. And that's the largest space we can think of. And in the smallest space, again, electrons revolve around the core. Like the structure is similar. This is, as mentioned, the unity of creation. And then, guess what? There's an attraction between the electron and the atomic core. And how is it calculated? Surprise, it is proportional to the masses and inversely proportional to the square of distance. Subhanallah. So like the rule governing these two, the largest force we can think of and the smallest force we can think of in terms of the position, not in terms of the magnitude, are the same rule, right? The same formula, the same calculation method. That's crazy if you think about it. That shows you clearly that this is no accident. This is like a very wise being designed this. And so that one day, once your scientific discovery becomes mature enough, you will say subhanallah, right? So that's just an example of unity of creation. There are many other examples of this. And look, the Quran says, وَخَلَقَنَاكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا, we created you in pairs. Or subhanallah, خَلَقَ الْأَزْوَاجَ كُلَّهَا, he said, I created everything in pairs. مِمَّا تُنْبِتُ الْأَرْضِ وَمِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَمِمَّا لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, from what is produced by the ground, from yourselves, and from things you don't even know. Surah Yasin. So, at first, early people would think, okay, Allah created us in pairs, that means men and women. And then later on we find what? Positive electronic charges and negative electronic charges. Positive ions and negative ions. Everything is paired. Subhanallah. And that is actually, a motivation for you to appreciate Tawheed. Like everything is dependent on the other pair. Right? Only positive charge cannot exist. Only negative charge cannot exist. They have to balance each other out in any matter. Only Allah can be purely independent. That's subhanallah. Okay, religious rituals of Islam require scientific knowledge. So right now, if you want to know where the Qibla is, you pull out your phone and Muslim Pro, right? But 700 years ago, 800 years ago, when a person in Baghdad wants to know which way is the Qibla, he has to use a device and look at the star. So this pushed the development of astronomy and mathematics and algebra. It should be, what's the other one about the shape of mathematical shapes? Geometry, exactly. You need to know geometry to calculate, right, the distances and everything. So the rituals of Islam actually encouraged scientific discovery. Just a few examples, many of you probably already know. The English word algorithm come from the Muslim mathematician Al-Khwarizmi. The word algebra is named after his book Al-Kitab al-Mukhtasar في حساب الجبر والمقابلة. And the influential Renaissance scholar Giordano Bruno, Italian guy, was a landmark figure in the history of free thoughts in Western discourse. And another Western historian, Francis Yates, argues that Bruno was deeply influenced by Arab astrology, particularly the philosophy of Ibn Rushd Averroes. Professor Emeritus, which is a fancy word for retired professor of astronomy and of the history of science at Harvard University, Dr. Owen Gingerich, said the whole idea of criticizing Ptolemy and reforming his model was part of the climate of opinion inherited by the Latin West from Islam. Right? So there's so much to say about what Islamic civilization contributed to modern human civilization and to modern science. And then you don't hear about this in high school science textbooks normally, right? There's a almost unproportional omission of Muslim contribution, and we need to consciously change that, right? In our own capacity. And again, I'll mention that there's an exhibition in Macau right now called 1001 Inventions and the Arabic Civilization in its Golden Age. It's in Macau until 27th of October. So the ticket is very cheap. It's like 20 Hong Kong dollars. And if you're a Hong Kong citizen, going to Macau is very easy. So do find some time, take your kids or take your cousins, take your family members to go see this exhibition. It's great. It will teach you a lot. For example, it talks about the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, Baytul Hikmah, which was the center of knowledge. It was like a collection of all advanced technologies and theories in the world, right? At that time, the international academic language was Arabic, just like now it's English. Now a Chinese guy, if he wants to write an academic paper, I have to write in English because that's the dominant language. But back then, even why is Sahih al-Bukhari is written in Arabic, but Imam al-Bukhari is from Bukhara, right? It's Central Asian. He spoke something like Russian. He's not Arab. And then there are many other scholars, Sheikh al-Albani, who graded many Hadees. He's not Arab. And there are many other scholars, even secular scientists, so-called secular scientists. They all wrote in Arabic. Many Western students actually went to Morocco, for example, Al-Maghrib, and what is now Afghanistan, Baghdad, to study all kinds of sciences, not only religious sciences, but also astronomy, mathematics, biology, medicine, and everything. In Baghdad, I don't know if you can see this, but it is written here that, and this is from the exhibition, so I'm just luring you to go to the exhibition. It says Al-Ma'mun, which is a Khalifa in Baghdad about 1200 years ago. He is said to have encouraged translators and scholars by giving handsome rewards. Hunay ibn Ishaq, for example, was rewarded the weight in gold for each book he translated. So you translate a book and he will give you as much gold as the book weighs. SubhanAllah, that's how much the leaders of the Muslim world back then valued knowledge, right? You don't have to worry about your livelihood basically if you're pursuing knowledge. What about the Muslim world nowadays? When you say you are talib al-ilm, they assume you are very poor. Because that's how we treat talab al-ilm nowadays. Right? We don't give them financial support anymore. We don't like to think of scholars as the honorable members of society anymore. We like to think of the businessmen and the engineers and the doctors and lawyers of the honorable members. And no doubt they are honorable and they're doing great things for the society. But once a nation or a community downplays knowledge and devalues knowledge, and this nation will be downgraded as well. So look, it says the production of books was made, from rulers to ordinary people, the love and passion for books was shared. Can we say that about ourselves now? Can we say like it's a Muslim trait that we all like reading books. I wouldn't think that would be that's not true, right? We don't find the passion to read books anymore. We don't find the patience to read books anymore. Even if we are passionate about knowledge, we prefer a YouTube video. We prefer a podcast, right? We prefer watching a Facebook Live. Reading a book becomes like such a unbearably painful and burdensome thing. But reading is still the primary way of learning. I keep telling my students, no matter how much the world changes, no matter how much the world tries to tell you that it's the new age of technology and media, you have to read. It's just that important. So again, let's pick up the habit of reading, and that's why the Muslims became so prosperous. They valued knowledge, they valued reading, and we all know that the first university, in terms of issuing degree and separating different subjects in majors, was Jamiatul Qarawiyyin, which is in Morocco, Fas, and I went there last year, and I can still sense that atmosphere of learning in that old city. I saw some old gentlemen selling fruits on the street, fruit sellers, and they were reading books on the side. SubhanAllah. And they were very calm, like they were not disturbed by the noises of the market. They were just reading, absorbed in their books. So we should pick up that. I'm coming to an end. So we defeated, or like we explained, the three misperceptions about the relationship between religion and science. And now let's come to the reality. What actually should be the relationship between religion and science? Firstly, are Muslims against science? Certainly not, right? We thrived in science. We were the ones who pushed the development of science. We were the first ones to actually, we were the beginners, initiators of modern science. So we're not against science. We embrace science and we welcome science. But we acknowledge that science cannot single-handedly solve all your problems. Science cannot by itself make you a whole person. Science cannot by itself give you a meaningful life. That's because, first of all, science does not provide purpose, nor can it. It cannot provide a purpose. And human beings are purpose-driven creatures. Nobody does anything without a purpose. Whatever you do, there's a purpose. There's a hidden reason, even if you're not conscious, but there's a purpose behind. But science is just an explanation of what it is. It's an explanation of processes and mechanisms. Like, this is how it happened, and that's it. What's the purpose? What's the purpose of the self-rotation of the Earth and the rotation of the Earth around the Sun? It doesn't say. It just says this is how the Earth rotates, and this is how long it takes for the Earth to rotate. But what's the purpose of it? It doesn't say. Religion says purpose. Religion says, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُم مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. It is He who created everything on earth for you. Right? Religion talks about purpose. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, لِيَبَلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. Everything on earth is to test which one of you is better in action. إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا مَا عَلَى الْأَرْضِ زِينَةً لَهَا لِنَبَلُوَهُمْ أَيُّهُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. We created everything on earth as a decoration so that we can test them which one of them is best in action. There's a purpose now. Right? Everything's existence, there's a purpose now. Science cannot provide a purpose. And secondly, science does not provide a moral framework. Like, it tells you how things work, but it doesn't guide your decisions, especially decisions about what is right and wrong, what is good or bad. It doesn't say that, right? That is why scientifically everyone knows smoking is bad, and it's scientifically proven that alcohol is bad for your health, but we still have so many people drinking and smoking in the world. Because scientific conclusions is not a moral guidance. It's just what it is. And it doesn't really influence the way you act. So Jordan Peterson says that religion does something that science doesn't do at all, which is to tell you how to act, how to live your life, how to make your decisions, what to do and what not to do. And that's an important part of life, right? And science and religion are compatible. In what way? Let me first quote a very interesting paragraph. Just give me 3 more minutes and I'll finish. This is, I think he's a Nobel Prize winning, or at least a very, very acknowledged scholar in the field of, what's that called? In study of molecular sciences, basically. In my quest for my secret of life, like what is life? I started my research in histology. Unsatisfied by the information that cellular morphology could give me about life, I turned to physiology. So about physiology, how your body functions. Finding physiology too complex, I took up pharmacology, which is now about substances, matters, chemicals. And he's going top down, he's going down. Still finding the situation too complicated, I turned to bacteriology, one particular kind of substance. But bacteria were even too complex, so I descended to the molecular level, only molecules now, studying chemistry and physical chemistry. After 20 years of work, I was led to conclude that to understand life, we have to descend to the electronic level and to the world of wave mechanics. But electrons are just electrons and have no life at all. Evidently, on the way, I lost life. It had run out between my fingers. So this is something, look. Zent Jorgi describes today's problems of science, the inability to integrate results and concepts that come from different approaches and levels of analysis. So science is a very fragmented way of looking at the world. When I look at astronomy, I'm only looking at astronomy, as if it has nothing to do with my biology. And when I study my biology, it's as if it has nothing to do with chemistry. So we only study things in a very fragmented and decontextualized manner, like A is A and B is B, and A and B are disconnected. Uh-oh, this is terrible. I have no power left. Uh-oh. Yeah, there's only one slide left, so alhamdulillah, I think that's still okay. So eventually, that is why when the Prophet ﷺ was asked about ruh, soul, what did he say? He said, it's the secret with my Lord. Only Allah knows what is life. So scientifically, they can't even decide what is life. Where is life? They can't find life, right? Because your organ is living. Your organ has life. And your cells have life. And even some of the organelles in your cell have life. But then when you go further down to molecules and then to electrons, they have no life. Where did life go? All of a sudden, like there's a gap between life, living things, and non-living things, and you can't find where that is. So this is something amazing, I think he said, which shows that ruh is truly something that Allah blew into us. That's just how it is. You can't find life. Allah just gave it to us, right? And the last slide, which there's no battery left, is, have you heard of Nietzsche, the German philosopher? He famously said, God is dead. And atheist people who didn't read Nietzsche, who are ignorant, think of this statement, God is dead, as a celebration of atheism. They think that Nietzsche is saying, like, it's a good thing, perfect, great, God is dead. Now we can use our rational thinking, now we can use our senses, now we can use science to build our own humanly comprehensible, beautiful new world. But that's not what Nietzsche said at all. If you read what he wrote, the statement, God is dead, is actually mourning. His statement, God is dead, is actually a sad, very depressed, and pessimistic and painful statement. Because he said, once God is dead, human beings, you have to create your own value systems to sustain your meaning. Because you wouldn't have meaning anymore if you don't have God. And he predicted nihilism, which is a very prevalent modern problem. Modernism, in philosophy, modernism leads to relativism. Relativism is, nothing is really right, nothing is really wrong, it's just a matter of perspective, right? Everyone has their own decision. This is liberal relativism. And then relativism eventually leads to nihilism, which is there's nothing right, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing true, there's nothing false. It's just a matter of perspective. Remember Dr. Jonathan Brown from Georgetown University, from Yaqeen Institute, he once came to Hong Kong, who talked about human rights. And he said, what it has come to in the United States. If a person says, I want to set myself on fire and burn myself to death, an average American would say, well, if you don't harm anybody, then go ahead and do it. Because everything is acceptable, because there's this nihilist thinking. There's no meaning, there's no purpose. You can do whatever you want as long as you don't harm any other people. And clearly, any human being with a little bit of conscience knows this is wrong, this is problematic, there's something wrong about this. So Nietzsche, he actually expressed the idea that human beings have this innate tendency or this innate need to be connected to a higher meaning, to a higher being, to a transcendental value system. And if you don't go to God for that, you have to create your own. And experience has shown, history has shown, human beings are incapable of doing this. We're not able to create our value systems. We've tried. Hitler tried. Hitler tried to establish a value system that the Aryan people are the highest people, that racial cleansing is the meaning of life, that to maintain the purity of our race and to make sure that our ideology prevails is the meaning of life, and how terribly the results are, right? And many nationalism in the 20th century in the Soviet Union was that way. They tried to create meaning in totalitarianism, in ideologies, to give people a group identity, to give people a sense of connection to a bigger group, and so that maybe your life will be meaningful, maybe your life will be worth living. Temporarily, yes, maybe. There were very passionate Communist Party members. Cut this part off. There were very passionate Nazi members. There were, scientists in Auschwitz torturing women and children, and they found meaning in that. And how terrible are the meanings we human beings created, right? So when you look at the 20th century history, you are so clear that we're incapable of creating our meanings, and the meanings we create are ugly and impractical and have terrible consequences. So based on what Nietzsche said and what we've seen in the 20th century and the discussions of the modern philosophers, we know we need God. You can't live without God. Or let's say you can't live in a human manner without God. You can still live like a Satan. You can live, that's why there are so many satanic actions in the world. When the guy goes into a mosque and shoots 49 people, that's satanic. More than 50 people. That's devilish, because you have no meaning anymore. There's no purpose. There's no guideline. There's no framework. So we need God and we need religion, and that is the conclusion. Another side thing, one last thing, I promise, 1 minute, I want to say is this. So the emphasis on scientific development was almost as if it was a reaction to the oppression of the church. For hundreds of years, they were oppressed, science could not develop, and now industrial renaissance and intellectual development, and now it's like everything is about science and the material world and the visible world and enjoyment and utilitarianism. And then when this goes to an extreme, now we need to react to that again, because we need to maintain balance as Muslims. So we as Muslims should be the first one to encourage our children to study social sciences, to study anthropology, to study philosophy and religion and sociology. And we should be the last ones to tell our children that you should only be an engineer, or you should only be a lawyer or a doctor. Right? We shouldn't, because nowadays you can see most of the problems in the world are not material problems. We're not lacking buildings, actually. You do know how many empty houses there are in China? Empty flats, nobody living there. But they keep building new flats to boom the economy and whatever. So most of the problems in the world, like the Syrian war, what's happening in Yemen, what's happening in Sudan, what's happening in Palestine, you think those are material problems? Is it a lack of technology? Is it a lack of engineers? No, it's a lack of human conscience. It's a lack of meaning and what is right and what is wrong and what is good, what constructs human society. So we should actually, if we want to fix the problems in the world, we do need to know about the things that I shared earlier, and we need our children to know as well. So take myself as an example. I did my bachelor in engineering in the University of Hong Kong, which by the way ranks number 6 in the world. And I interned at AECOM. I can have a profitable job if I become an engineer, but I'm now doing a Master of Education, and I'm very interested in sociology. And a lot of people still say to me every day, oh, what kind of job can you get with a Master of Education? You're going to be a teacher? Or, what can you do with sociology? What's the use of sociology? All of these statements, and I say, no, I changed my focus because I see most of the problems in the world are spiritual problems. I'm still an engineer, but I don't intend to construct buildings anymore. I intend to construct human hearts again. Inshallah ta'ala. Let's also intend that. جزاكم الله خيرا for listening. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.